Hey there guys, it's Steve here from Steve's blog, and this is the Old Stock Canadian Survivalist vlog. You probably know me as the guy who gets hashtag Trudeau must go trending on Twitter every 6 hours. Today, we're going to talk about what you need to survive when Trudeau destroys the country from crippling pipeline deficiencies and over-vaccination. If, no, when the world ends, you're going to need 3 things to survive and keep yourself alive. First of all, you're going to need the survival ration bucket sold at oldstockcanadiansurvivalist.ca, colloidal silver for any illnesses you get, gold to buy stuff from stores, obviously, and you got to get your hands on a gun. Okay, so now that I've officially gotten myself in shit, let's talk about preppers. The popular image of these folks in media is essentially like libertarian reactionary types. They seem convinced they're going to need gold bullion to survive absolutely fantastic doomsday scenarios and dream of living out like some kind of Walking Dead fantasy. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? Right? So then why is this snowflake, liberal, communist Antifa releasing a video with a title like "I'm becoming a prepper and here's why"? Well, maybe I'm just an anxious Betty here. Still, as I mentioned in my capitalism and loneliness video, I have this sense of overwhelming paralysis in the face of massive issues way too large and impersonal for one person to do anything about. I mean, I've grown up in the shadow of a world where governments have more or less abandoned doing anything for anyone who isn't wealthy. And we all spent the last year watching the government go from indifference to the stresses of the COVID pandemic to a burning passion for killing people to ensure their corporate bosses don't have a bad quarter. And that's just the tip of the melting iceberg. I also know my older years will be defined by the true horrors of climate change coming home to roost. I don't really have faith that our government will do anything to prevent or even help people recover from disasters, the likes of which never seen before in human history. That's not even mentioning the billions of refugees that will be displaced from the habitable zones of our planet shrinking. Now, that went from 0 to 100 real quick. All of this is just saying I see many disasters that could cripple or collapse our societies in the not too distant future, and the state doesn't seem like it's going to come to the rescue. So one thing I did last year was move out of downtown Toronto and into a mid-sized Canadian city, into an actual, real, honest-to-God house. With that, I decided to prepare to build mutual aid in my new community. At least I could help make something for us to band together when things get bad, or at least be a bit more useful in a crisis. So I'm becoming a bit of a prepper. Today we'll go into what that means, why people have gotten into survivalist stuff in the past, and the issue of people like Steve. Then, if you stick around, what you can do, even if you live in a shoebox with no money. But first, a word from our sponsor.
This is Tristan. This is the year 2023. You thought 2020 was bad. Just you wait for 2022. This is my last survival ration. I don't know what we're going to eat after that. I've considered baking the cat, but I don't know if I have it in me. Oh wait, what's this? Oh my god, oh my god. Is this Japanese snacks? Oh my god, my family could live off this for... Oh my god, I can't even...
Yes, me from the future, this video sure is sponsored by Bokksu. Bokksu's a company that gives you a taste of Japan by sending you these crates stuffed full of snack foods from Japan, exploring their culture through a little bit of their regional treats.
Oh god. In 22, they arrived first in Japan.
First-time Bokksu customers get the Seasons of Japan box, which is a tour of different seasons of the country. After that, though, you get monthly themed boxes like this one here that I got for the sponsorship. It's themed around Bokksu's birthday. Look at the goodies in here. I can't wait to eat them all.
No! Please!
Don't mind if I do.
No! No!
One of the best things I like about Bokksu is that it's more than just like the few things you can find at an import store. They actually work with makers and artisanal creators to make sure that each snack is authentic. They really are a taste of where they are. One of the snacks I got last time were Sakura candies made by a 100-year-old candy maker. So to get 10% off your own authentic Japanese snack box, use the code STEPBACKHISTORY10 in a link that is both in the description and the pinned comment. Welcome to Step Back! If you see this and think, man, I'd like more of that, then there's a subscribe button. You know what to do. So, since 99% of arguments on the internet are about semantics, let's just lay out definitions. I will use prepper and survivalists interchangeably in this video. Essentially, it's a term for people trying to be prepared in case of some sort of catastrophe that they're anticipating. On the most minor scale, it can be something as simple as having some emergency supplies in case of a blackout, but it quickly escalates. People have prepared for nuclear war, the collapse of the state, peak oil, pandemics, monetary collapse, and even the rapture. And honestly, looking at survivalists of different periods, you get a view of what the cultural anxieties and existential risks of the period were or were perceived as. So sociologically, it's interesting. Before the 1950s, many preppers were like religious sorts, getting ready for the apocalypse. In the early Cold War, though, the real apocalyptic threat of a nuclear exchange did get some people interested in survival stuff. You've probably seen some of this stuff in the period and saw it as a little goofy. Duck and cover drills and fallout shelters are all part of this movement. In the 1960s, when Satan let libertarians become a thing, anxieties grew in right-wing circles that the growing devaluation of the US dollar from gold was going to lead to economic collapse, and therefore we must be ready for the gold apocalypse. Many American preppers to this day hoard gold because of this, as if gold would mean anything after the collapse of civilization. The 70s saw a period of monetary inflation as well as an oil crisis, which spurred those gold heads to double down. This exposure to the fragility of the global economy prompted a lot of new people to get into survival training. However, it only became a real phenomenon when a book on survivalist preparedness called The Alpha Strategy became a New York Times bestseller for 9 weeks in 1981. Increasing tension in the Cold War also brought back the fear of nuclear apocalypse. So it was a real high watermark for disaster preparers. By the 1990s, without a Cold War, many preppers began to invent things to be paranoid about in order to justify stockpiling supplies, and by this point, a genuinely heart-stopping amount of ammunition and firearms. Clinton passing an assault weapons ban spurred up worry that they'd be needing to fight the government, who were going to be coming for your guns. And if this rhetoric sounds like a lot of crossover with the white power movement, then yes, I'm glad you're paying attention. A lot of the white power guys in the 70s through 90s were really into this survivalist stuff. The other incident of the 90s causing preppers to prep more was the threat of the world order collapsing because of the dreaded Y2K bug. It was a computer glitch that turned into a massive media hype in the 1990s. People worried that when the clock struck midnight in the year 2000, every computer would go apeshit and the world would collapse. I realize now that I'm old enough that many of you probably don't even have memories of the absolute lunacy that went down in the late 90s because of it. Maybe that's worth a video someday. Oh boy. The things we worried about before 9/11. And then there was 9/11. Woo! A whole short-lived industry of terrorism preparedness kits went on sale. I remember people thinking they needed things like biohazard suits in case Muncie, Indiana became the target of a dirty bomb. Though, later in this baby century, we did see a new form of survivalism. The subprime mortgage crash and now the COVID pandemic have grown the hobby much more. Heck, it even got a show on National Geographic, making prepper a household name. It also built the common and not necessarily incorrect view of these preppers being poorly informed people or reactionaries who border on having some kind of apocalyptic ideation. And yeah, there is something to that. Because of that history and the melodramatic nature of right-wing media, those preparing for the end are rife with libertarians and or reactionaries. Instead of thinking about rebuilding a community or looking out for each other, it's libertarians hoarding gold, raw milk, and weapons. The white power movement leapt on prepping. Being not too politically distant from the libertarians, this shouldn't surprise many people. Neo-Nazis and Klansmen have been praying, literally praying, for a social collapse to justify their desire to make a white ethno-state and play out their Turner Diaries fantasies. On top of survival, they hope to start an actual civil war or a race war. Another dominant form of modern-day preppers are extreme Christians who read the Left Behind series and are preparing for the literal rapture. So yeah, preppers are a real rogues gallery. I've established that it's heavily based on histrionics, reactionary politics, and appears to be full of some of the worst people you can think of. So why the hell are you doing this, Tristan? There's a different sort of prepper, which have always been around in some capacity, but really started to pick up after the 2008 financial crash. Instead of some post-apocalyptic fantasy of finally allowing legal murder, it's more about refocusing on what you need to make your community into something self-sustaining. Here's a description of this idea speculated in 2009.
When you go back to the last depressing days when we were in a survival mode, the last one, the Y2K of course, before the 1970s, what had happened was you only saw this one element of survivalist. You know, the caricature. The guy with the AK-47 heading to the hills with enough ammunition and pork and beans to ride out the storm. This is a very different one from that. You're seeing average people taking smart moves and moving in intelligent directions to prepare for the worst. So survivalism in every way possible. Growing your own, self-sustaining, doing as much as you can to make it as best as you can on your own. And it can happen in urban area, suburban area, or the ex-urban. And it also means becoming more and more tightly committed to your neighbors, your neighborhood, working together, and understanding that we're all in this together, and that when we help each other out, that's going to be the best way forward.
I have been an anarchist since about 2009, and for a long time, since there were so few of us, I let my commitment to the ideals of it slip quite a bit. I was always distrustful of the state after seeing us all march mindlessly to war after war and seeing the future for my entire generation go down in flames without any help in sight. But I think the thing that snapped me back to attention was watching the response to this pandemic. Something I always knew but never acted upon for some reason was that the state would essentially abandon its people at the first opportunity. I think we should never forgive the relentless urges to reopen the economy and kill millions to make the number go up. It doesn't take much work to imagine that when automation makes our labor no longer necessary, they won't hesitate to let us die. We'll have outlived our usefulness to the people who call the shots. To the state, we're always going to be seen as subjects and servants. Our deaths will always be a mere number, and our rage just points on a public opinion chart. Oh god, I've been reading way too much Octavia Butler. Seeing this response to a pandemic made me then think forward to what the next few decades of my life will likely contain. As climate change begins to make our planet less habitable, we're going to be rocked with major natural disasters and refugee crises of the like never seen before in human history. If the state does help, it'll be in some form of disaster capitalism. Neoliberal ideologues will step in to privatize the recovery. What little remained of the social safety net or government service will be replaced with private for-profit services only available to those with money. Under neoliberalism, if you don't have money and you don't perform labor, your life is literally worthless. Less than worthless. You're a burden to a maximized, efficient economy. I mean, look at how our government's treated people in long-term care facilities or the immunocompromised. So, it's not surprising left-wing preppers are on the rise. People are taking a tally of the genuine threat of this stripped for parts rickety society we let decay around us, collapsing under the challenges of the 21st century. We're realizing more and more that no one is coming to save us. So, as an anarchist, I realize that we need to be each other's safety net. The only people who will care about us are people who see us as faces and names, rather than statistics and productivity. The only society that won't let people drown in the dust that used to be our river doesn't organize from a centralized state authority, but from a complex weave of mutual aid. That's why I'm doing this. I want to help people build that mutual aid. We'll need it when we come to terms with the reality that the state, no matter what ideological adjectives we attach to it, will ultimately abandon us when we can no longer serve it. And to help build that, some supplies and training to that effect won't hurt. So obviously I have made every person who watched this far rabid anarchists ready to prepare. So how does one prep? How do I get start? Welcome, one and all, to Tristan's Guide to the End. How to prepare for societal collapse to make your community happy, healthy, and self-sustaining. I will preface all of this advice with the disclaimer that I am an idiot. Less than a week ago, I thought I had a bee in my face, and it turned out it was a leaf stuck on some spider web. This should be a place to get started, but it's not a place to end. I'll have a bunch of links in the description to valuable guides that can really get you started. First of all, don't do this if you can't afford it or don't have the living space. This is about being ready just in case, not an emergency you need to be prepared for tomorrow. That being said, there are some things you can do that don't take much space and are cheap and easy. Some things are just learning skills that can be done online for free. The point is you only do as much as you comfortably can. First things first, take care of your own health and make sure that your family's taken care of. This means that stuff like your will, your estate, and life insurance are all up to date and that the records are physical and kept in a safe place. If you require a regular medication or a medical device, see if you can somehow get an extra supply of what you need just in case you lose access to a pharmacy or a doctor for a while. There are many supplies and skills that you can quickly get and are handy to have around for community health. Learning CPR or first aid can be beneficial. Having these supplies to tend to and dress wounds can be literal lifesavers. Having a collection of common medications for swelling and fever like aspirin or ibuprofen, as well as antiseptic and cloth bandages are also a very good idea. As much as money and space allows this to be comfortable, food and supplies can go a big way, even if it's just for a few days to a few weeks. This is stuff like water, shelf-stable food like protein bars, but make sure you don't let them expire. Make sure to keep things to start fires, flashlights, preferably ones that have solar power or a crank charge, something like that. Keep some heating and cooling stuff around, like heating pads or mylar blankets, as well as a pop-up tent for shelter in a pinch. You'll need hygiene products like deodorant, toothbrushes, toothpaste, floss, which has a double use as cordage, and wet wipes. Grab some small multi-tools, maybe some books or a board game for entertainment, mobile solar-powered battery packs for your phones, and the locations and numbers of nearby emergency spots like hospitals. A lot of this is, stuff to buy, and I'll have a link to a bunch of guides for that kind of stuff in the description. Oh, and get into gardening if you can. That's what I've been trying this year. It is not going well.
Goddamn squirrels.
Then you have to answer the question about whether to get or train with a gun. The world is a rough place. In many ways, we're teetering on the brink, and the only way to pull ourselves back involved changing massive, impersonal systems we have no individual control over. It can cause feelings of hopelessness and maybe even paralysis. Being a prepper isn't a replacement for activism, but it is a tangible thing that you can do. It can revitalize your sense of agency, and being ready for the worst helps break the paralysis to do the activism that needs to be done, hopefully to prevent you from needing the stuff that you're doing to prepare. And at the end of the day, with whatever's coming for you in your community, you'll be prepared.